He would be very good for Manchester United, in my view. You know, it's understandable that somebody like Dan, who is very, very good at his job, would see the Manchester United job as a, you know, very interesting challenge at this stage of his career. I mean, I would say with Newcastle, Newcastle have been tremendously successful since the change in ownership, really. They've done a really, really good job with the club. One can understand them being, you know, upset or disappointed with the Dan Ashworth situation. But, you know, ultimately, you can't really criticise Dan for maybe looking at the most coveted job in football as a sporting director, particularly with the.
Welcome back to the Football Terrace. An exclusive interview has taken place with the BBC and Sir Jim Ratcliffe, talking about his investment into Manchester United, his plans for the future, and how he believes he can get Manchester United back to the very top. And we're looking here at the Dan Ashworth conversation. We're going to be looking at his view of the squad and the manager, what he wants to do for Old Trafford, and something so important, talking about the stylistic element of United, how we play football, and who actually manages that in the modern day game. For Man United, it has been 10 years of extreme regression, wasted investment, continuing debt problems, and really just failure by the standards that we have set over the past 100 or so years, but also failure based on what we have invested financially into this squad. And it's such an important thing for Man United fans to listen to what he's saying and then reflect on what the biggest problems at Man United have been for the past decade. The base and foundation feels very, very good to me. You've heard him talking there about Dan Ashworth and why he thinks he'd be a good addition to the club. Let's keep listening to what Sir Jim says, but make sure you hit the like and the share button.
With the challenge at Manchester United, which is getting it from where it has been in the last 11 years, which has been disappointing, to, you know, where we would like to get it, which is, you know, at the top of the tree of football.
And you'd be willing to spend millions of pounds, 15, 20 million pounds are being talked about in order to get him quicker?
No, I think those are sort of silly numbers, really, and I'd rather not get into that.
Understood.
But what clearly doesn't make any sense is for Dan Ashworth to be sat doing nothing for 18 months. That's not productive for anybody. I mean, you know.
Of course, and this should make Man United fans, to a degree, relatively confident of getting their man. So Jim doesn't look pressed about the situation. He doesn't believe they're going to pay 15 to 20 million pound for the individual. So I think it's something Man United fans can, to a degree, relax themselves surrounding a little bit. But Dan Ashworth is key. What he did for England, what he did for Brighton, and what he did start to do at Newcastle. It's what I call it the equaling things out, creating the balance within the football club, ensuring that every single department is pulling in the same direction. The style of football is the same. The profile of a young lady we sign, a young boy we sign, you know, a player we sign in his pomp. There is a connection. The managers that we want to employ, the coaches we bring in, the scouts, that there is a joined up approach in all those areas. That is going to be massively important. It's really good to see the confidence that Sir Jim has got here. Let's take a look at what he said about the squad and manager. Take a little listen.
Over the last, the squad has played really good football over the last couple of months, but it's not at the level we want to get to.
You're impressed by some of the players. What do you make of the coach, Erik ten Hag?
Well, I don't think it's appropriate for me to talk about individuals in that organisation.
I will say this straight away. Perfect. This is something I've spouted for a long time and I stand by it. Airing your dirty linen in public isn't correct. So he hasn't been drawn out by the journalist, who, of course, is doing his job and trying to get a spicy answer. He's played that down. I'm not going to talk about individuals at this point. That also, for me, is a little bit of a kiss of death to Ten Hag, because if they were 100% behind him at this point, that would be the message. It's good to see they're not. It's good to see they are open to change. That is key. The open-mindedness is needed here.
What I would say in respect to the coach is that if you look at this last 11 years, you know, Manchester United has had quite a few coaches, and some of those coaches are very capable and they've been very successful, but nobody's been successful in that Manchester United environment for the last 11 years. So that would say to me that there's something wrong with the environment.
And who's to blame for that?
I honestly, I want to cry. I genuinely want to cry. And this isn't me digging out any other YouTubers, any other Man United fans online. The amount of times I have said, almost to the word, what Sir Jim has just stated there, that when you go through so many managers over a decade and they all fail, they all have about the same lifespan, the same problems appear each time, you have to look beyond that manager. It doesn't mean I think those managers should stay. It doesn't mean they didn't make mistakes. It doesn't mean they are not problems before anybody in the back starts to cry. But there's an environmental issue, a cultural issue, a strategic issue at Man United. If you're in a relationship and you have 10 girlfriends in 5 years, and each time you break up for the exact same reasons, it comes a point where you have to start looking at yourself as the issue, as opposed to the individual people that you were dating. And that's exactly the space Man United are in. The fact we now have someone in our ownership structure that recognizes this straight away, it's palpable, it's powerful, it's of paramount importance for Manchester United's progression.
Well, it's not constructive for me to blame anybody. It's just a fact of life. It hasn't been. So my focus is obviously on the future.
And I also love what he's done there. A lot of people have messaged me in the last few days saying, I don't like the new structure with Sir Jim because he's speaking respectfully about the Glazers. The Glazers are still here. I understand the Glazers still being here irks people. But what he's not going to do is publicly slag his business partners off. That is ridiculously stupid. If anybody here has business partners and you're having struggles with them, arguments with them, disagreements with them, or you look at what they've done in the past as poor, you don't slag them off to your mates. You don't slag them off publicly. You don't do an interview on the BBC and say how bad they are. How is that going to help, again, the club become better? Stop thinking about what you want emotionally and how you want certain people to suffer and be called out, and think about what's best for the football club. This is perfect from Sir Jim. He also goes on to state in this interview, and this for me is so important indeed. He says that we are not going to go back and forth between the Jose style and the Pep Guardiola style. It's not the way we'll run the club. Otherwise, you change all the time. We won't do that. In modern football, you have to decide what path to follow and stick to it. He then goes on to state that we will decide the style of football with the general manager and sporting director and possibly the recruitment of the manager. And it will be Man United's style of football, and the manager will have to play that style. And I'm not even going to lie to you guys. Again, this brings such emotion to the edge, right to the surface for me. Because it's everything I've been stating for a decade. I've been called wrong. I've been called a liar. Now, look, I could be seeking confirmation bias here, and I could be called out on that. But it's every single department of the club that Sir Jim is talking about. He's echoing what I said. Now, listen, I don't think I'm some guru that could run a football club. I don't think I know I've got this deeper understanding of the game than anybody else. The reason that I knew I was right all along is because we were doing things wrong. We were acting in an old-fashioned way. And all the current successful clubs around the world, either on the same level as United in terms of spend, so Madrid's, Bayern Munich, etc., or clubs that were smaller than us financially, but pound for pound outperforming us, they all, every single one of them, had a model where there's a club style of play. They didn't flick and change and switch between styles regularly. They all have top-class sporting directors, general managers in place. Everything that Sir Jim is talking about and doing here, talking about the culture and the structure, all of these things were great at all these other clubs. They have periods of bad times and they make mistakes, but they're easily and quickly rectified because the overarching structure around the club is great. Seeing Sir Jim say this, if you're not bought into Sir Jim, fine. But trust me when I tell you, this is everything we should be wanting to hear and everything we should be wanting to see. This is going to get Manchester United, in my humble opinion, back to the very top.
He's the greatest, or one of the great clubs in the world. Then he should have a stadium that's befitting of that. It probably isn't there today because, the stadium, it's a bit tired, frankly. It's in need of refurbishment. And I think there are two main issues in this club. One's performance on the field, and the other one probably is the stadium.
It sounds like your preference, Sir Jim, is for a new stadium, if it can be achieved.
If it can be achieved, then that would clearly be my. I think I'd be very excited about that prospect for the north of England. I think it would be fantastic for the north of England.
Listen, I'm not averse to a new stadium. especially if it's built on the same location, essentially. And if they knock down 80% of Old Trafford and rejuvenated it, it would look completely different anyway. It's going to be built in the same area. It's going to be built in the same location. So I'm not against it. But having a new stadium is also key. It sends a message to rivals. It sends a message to players. We are serious. We say we're the biggest in the world. We say we're one of the greatest in the world. We've got to behave like it. And part of your training facilities, your stadium is also key. So again, great to see the manager call this out and talk about it as well. The new owner talk about this as well.
I mean, exactly the same page as Alex Ferguson. I'd want to knock them all off their perch. I mean, Alex was a very driven, very competitive individual. And, he just wanted to win. And that's the only reason we're there at United, I mean, we're friends in the sense that we're all in the Northwest, but they are the enemies, They're clearly our biggest rivals and competitors in the UK. And then obviously you've got 2 or 3 clubs in Europe. But no, absolutely. Yeah, that's what we're there for, knocking them off their perch.
How far behind are you to them?
A long way behind them at the moment. Yeah, no, we are. Yeah, that's why I say it's this is it's not a light, so it's not going to change tomorrow. People need, unfortunately, to give us a little bit of time to get back to where we should be.
What, next season?
No, it won't be next season. It'll be 2 to 3 seasons. I think that would be silly to say that by next season we'll be at the same level of Manchester. I mean, it took Pep.
He's absolutely spot on again, and I love that he's not setting unrealistic and stupid expectations. It is going to take 2 to 3 years of progression to get anywhere near Man City's level. Not in terms of beating them in a game, getting into the top 4, winning trophies. In terms of consistently competing for the Premier League, consistently being a threat in the Champions League. It's going to take 2 to 3 years from this point to rip everything out from the last 10 to 11 years and build it all up again. Man United fans have got to be prepared for that. The fact that he knows this is also brilliant. The level of realization, the honesty, the integrity, and the understanding of the situation from Sir is massive. Now it's about bringing in, which I think he started to do with Omar Barada, with Dan Ashworth, the right individuals to set this football club up is going to be key. But this is a very insightful interview. I suggest you go and watch it on the BBC if you're a Man United fan. If you're a rival as well, I think you should listen to it also. But for me, and look, I will hold my hands up and say maybe there's a lot of confirmation bias here for me. Maybe I'm buying into what he's saying because it's literally a mirror image of all the major problems that I've said have existed at Man United for the past decade. Or it could just be that people like myself, Neeks, KJ, Canadian Cam, Indiana, so many of the original Man United fans on the football terrace who have been calling this out from day dot, who have stated that sacking managers may be needed at times, but won't fix the club. Selling Pogba and selling Bruno individually won't fix the football club. It's about how we are run. Hit the like button. Make sure you are subscribing, and we'll see you all again soon.